like, man, I love this job. Like, what if I just decide to be a bartender? Like, I'm not just a bartender, obviously. I was like the youngest in Vegas to ever have that title.
This whole job is 90% hospitality. It's 10% skill and talent.
The biggest, loftiest dream that I have is to become like the Anthony Bourdain of bartenders.
What are your current views on like the state of alcohol, cocktail, social media?
Why the reaching out to me and telling me you love what I do if you want me to do something not remotely authentic to what I put out there? There's a story behind everybody.
Chris is an incredible bartender in Las Vegas, but is also a social media sensation with over 280,000 followers on Instagram, 320,000 on TikTok. You may have seen him putting Parmesan cheese on a martini, going live while working behind the bar, or making you feel some type of way with his new Nightcap series, which has taken cocktail videos and turned them into just an emotional cinematic ride. Through it all, he's been shown that he's definitely not just a bartender. Chris, welcome to Behind the Stick.
You crushed that. Thank you for having me.
Well, awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for being our first guest and really being our guinea pig. I think both Leandro and I are super excited to get to chat with you. I know that actually both of us have actually hung out with you in person over the last year. And so when we were talking about guests for this podcast, you were kind of the first one that I was like, nah, we'll get Chris. And, kind of you're the first name on the list. Oh. And so basically the first thing I wanted to dive into is like, obviously you've been blowing up on social media, but I want to kind of take it back and go back to so you've been bartending now for like over 13 years, if I'm not mistaken. And you've worked at some incredible bars in Vegas. I kind of just want to start off by asking, how'd you get into bartending? Kind of what's the bar scene in Vegas like?
So I didn't grow up in Vegas. I'm originally from Pennsylvania. To backtrack really far, I started my college career actually pursuing an architecture degree, but my freshman year was 2008, housing market crash, interest rates spiked. The career path of an architect at that point, what I wanted to do, which was build custom homes, didn't look great. So I made a tough decision. I transferred to a business degree instead. I transferred schools to eventually land myself in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. But I would say architecture school gave me, even just for the 2 years that I was in it, a massive work ethic to approach business school. I'm going to take 21 credits a semester so I can catch up, sort of thing. And I still found that I had a lot of time in my hands. And so my mom actually suggested that I should get a restaurant job. So I walked around the corner from where I lived, and there was this dope little Mexican restaurant that was literally around the corner. And it was a little bit more elevated. It wasn't like a classic mom and pop, but it was owned by one. They were doing fun stuff, great dinner menu and cocktails. And the vibe was really fucking dope. So I was like, are you guys hiring? And so they were like, actually, we're hiring for a host. And I was like, well, I've never worked in the business, and I feel like that would be a great start. And I got hired on the spot. It was like an impromptu interview with the manager / my first bar mentor ever, and the owner eventually in the same 1 hour suite. And started as a host, worked my way through the rest of the restaurant. I always had my eye on the bar, but I learned how to food run, bus, be a server. And then at some point, the bar was getting so busy on the weekends, I was asking hey, do you need any help back there? And he was like, you know what? Let's just add you behind the bar as a bar back. Eventually, maybe I'll train you up to be a bartender. So for 6 months, I worked only on the weekends behind the bar to just kind of build my skill set. I watched the bartender that I worked with like a hawk. And eventually, it was really slow shifts, Sundays, Mondays, Tuesdays from our main bartender. And he was bartender and manager. So love the fun, different roles that you could fill when you work your way up in a small restaurant. But I worked my ass off to get faster, to understand how to make that particular bar work for the program we were doing. And I made primarily just margaritas, mojitos, sangria, micheladas, things that most cocktail bars don't necessarily always focus on. We had a hyper focus on those particular cocktails. And I was there for 5 years. I graduated from school and was actually in a very short stint 2 years as a pharmaceutical sales rep. I still bartended part-time. I had moved on and done like some other different restaurant gigs, a dive bar, a nightclub, just for like play money. But then I did really well as a pharmaceutical sales rep, and they took me out to Vegas for a product launch.
This is what I was going to ask, is why Vegas? But starting as a pharmaceutical sales rep to take you out to Vegas sounds like that follows. Yeah, that definitely follows. All right.
You know, I was 23, I think, when that trip happened. So one, pretty young for a pharmaceutical sales rep, but also like compared to the other people on the team, I was a baby, and I gravitated toward having fun with meeting bartenders there. Ended up extending my stay through the weekend, was kind of shown what the scene was like, and it blew my mind. Like, I didn't necessarily come from a city that had a very big cocktail culture. I kind of got a sense of like what their income was like, and this cost of living was pretty comparable, honestly. Vegas, fucking 10 years ago, was super cheap to live in. It's gone up a little bit. It's still doable considering the income you can make here, but it made sense. So I had like a little like thought in the back of my mind, if I wanted to come back to bartending full time, I would do it in Vegas.
Right. There's no sales tax. There's no state tax in Vegas too, right?
Yeah, there's no state income tax.
Which is, I think, a big draw. You know, that not only can you make a lot of money in the casinos, and not only that, you know, the drinking culture has upgraded probably since about 2002, 2003, because there was a long moment where Vegas was just a place where you get watered down Jack and Coke to keep you at a blackjack table or at a slot machine all night. Even Proprietors has gone in there and did like Skyfall there, and some really serious heavy hitters have gone in there. So the drink scene has changed.
But anyway, I put a full 2 years in sales before just in case, because the thought of working full time as a bartender in Vegas just, again, didn't leave my mind. And so I made sure if I needed to come back to some sort of career that was not within the bar industry and everything fell apart, I could come back to something. I quit my job, moved to Vegas, and then by the skin of my teeth, 3 months after moving there, I finally got a bartending gig with a little restaurant called Carson Kitchen, which in of itself was kind of a challenge because when I moved here, I realized because I worked strictly behind a bar at a Mexican restaurant for most of my career at that point and one dive bar, I really didn't have the experience needed to like sling classic cocktails or like a feature menu. But I remember in my interview process, he was the guy who was grilling me, I would say, was asking me like, how would I build certain classic cocktails? And he started with an old fashioned, then a Manhattan, but I'm pretty sure he went to like Corpse Survivor #2, and then French 75 or something. And I was like, listen, we could keep going back and forth, and I could pretend to try and get through this conversation and completely fail. Or I can tell you right now, I know that I don't know enough yet. And I think I blacked out, but I said something along the lines of, the reason why I want to work here is because I absolutely love this vibe. I love the menu. I love the people that work here. It was the last place that I ate on that first trip to Vegas. And I had been a few times back just to like enjoy it again when I moved there. And I was like, there's something about this place that I can't let go. And I've applied 5 times to get an interview. And I really think if you take your shot on me, I will prove to you that while I'm not your best bartender right now, in a year from now, I'm going to be like the one you call on, the one that you ask, that you like want to be there to serve your guests. And it worked. I eventually got hired, and I started working my ass off. I started reading a shit ton of cocktail books and entering cocktail competitions, really expanding my skill set, networking. And then I eventually, I guess some of the more pivotal career moves that I was the property mixologist for Red Rock. I was like the youngest in Vegas to ever have that title. I was like 25, I think, 27. And then I helped reopen the Palms. The Palms was bought by the Fertittas from the Maloofs, I believe. Palms had like a history of being like the classic, like local casino off the strip, but still near the strip. That was a massive party. The Real World was filmed there. There was iconic history behind it. And then the Fertittas dumped like $700 million into this property reinventing the steakhouse and center bar, to which I trained or assisted in training the team, coming up with a menu for both venues. It took about, I remember I was on property for 47 days in a row before we opened and had this massive like opening party. And then from there, I moved back to Pennsylvania for a short bit. I worked at a small little Italian restaurant, reinvented their program a little bit. And then 2020, moved back to Vegas, opened Barry's Downtown Prime, which was a steakhouse that had the same chef from the one at the Palms. They just parted ways and they decided to open up their own thing and name it after him. And then there's a small restaurant group called EDO. The chef was like a James Beard nom this year. We opened up a new restaurant at the beginning of, I think, last year. And that got massively successful. And I then got really big on the internet. And I decided, you know what, maybe this will be what I focus on for now. So, yeah.
What inspired you to start creating content, and like kind of when along this trajectory did you start creating content?
So I was, back when Instagram was primarily about images and photographs, I started finding, I was looking at prominent bars. So I was looking at like Deft & Co., other like namesake bars out of New York, and looking at their photography. And then every once in a while I would catch like a tag for a photographer. And then I think one of the first ones I came with that I thought I loved his work was Elliot from Apartment Bartender. Eventually through him and him tagging other creators that also took photographs of cocktails, Jordan of High Proof Preacher, Miguel, Holy Handcraft, I was like in love with their shit. So like I ended up like messaging them all the time, tagging them on like my own shit, taking it with my phone. I wasn't very good, but I was learning because I had like a little bit of an itch for photography. I had a camera that I was doing like streetscape and landscape type stuff early on in like 2011, 2012-ish. But then, I always like had like an itch to also like make my own account, do something separate, do something bar focused. And like, it was about, I was like 6 months after moving to Vegas, I secured the account, not just the Bartender, back in like 2016. And I did nothing with it. Just had my name, I had the account. I was like, there's something about the conversations you have with guests sometimes where like you're a young bartender, maybe you're in college, maybe, you might have another career path after the bartending life is over. But I always felt like, man, I fucking love this job. Like, what if I just decide to be a bartender? Like, I'm not just a bartender, obviously. And then clearly, like, there was a few guests that had, like, we would have this conversation, but then they would watch me work and, like, keep up with service, but, like, take care of them. And I pride myself on my service a lot while still being, like, able to handle volume. And I've worked most of the bar situations that I've worked in, I was, like, the only bartender with no bar back, like, literally doing everything, polishing, serving drinks, doing the fucking non-alcoholic, everything. And they'd be like, wow, you're really not just the bartender. And I had that said like a couple of times, but I love that sentiment, not just because like it was a compliment to me, but I look at every person who works behind a bar as someone who has an entirely, rich life of interests, family, friends, hobbies. Like, there's a story behind everybody. And I thought like a really cool way to, approach this account when I first started it was to kind of think like Humans of New York, where you take a photograph or a video of someone who works behind a bar, and then you interview them and get like just a little view or a window into their life. And you find out more than this person isn't just a vessel serving you a drink. They are a complete human, rich with like their own experiences that one, if they choose to live a life behind a bar for their whole career, what kind of person does that take? What kind of sacrifices, what kind of life do they live to absorb what that actually means? And it's on my mission as I develop my community and people that give a shit about me to like start converting a lot of what I do in that direction. Start having conversations. I did like a little bit of that, like conversations and cocktails piece, and I have one I need to edit and post, but I love learning about other people. And when you're a guest There's always that fun, like breaking the wall down and getting to know somebody just, you know, as they enjoy your bar. But being on the other side and learning who's serving you is just as important, I think.
I think that's a beautiful mission statement. I think that's like I really have been enjoying some of the stuff that you've been posting recently, the Nightcap series, the stuff with your dog. You know, it's actually stuff that I thought like I'd love to post this stuff, but I've never been like never really did it. You know, I just think it's great. I think you work it in really well with the subject of what you're doing. Like, you know, you work kind of cocktails at, you know, which is like a nice thing because I think that people have a tendency to pigeonhole you when you're doing this one thing. So if you're doing cocktails in a specific way on social media for a long time, and then you do something else, you tend to either lose a lot of views or people complain about it. And what I think is really great about you is that you're sort of establishing this thing. It's like, I'm establishing myself as this, so that's what people will expect, so that you can feel free to kind of be a little more open with what you're doing, which I think is really smart. It's really, really smart.
Thank you.
And Chris, I think just let's take that opportunity and like with your Nightcap series, like what drove you creatively to explore that? Because I think Leandro's kind of hit it on the nail, at least as far as how I feel about it too, where you're just showcasing you, but the cocktails are still present, and just kind of talk about like the creative process behind that and like why you decided to start doing those kinds of videos.
So I would say it's a culmination of different things. Like I've noticed that like as I create more content and I get more comfortable behind a camera and like displaying a sense of vulnerability, but also like just feeling more like myself behind a camera. Because I look at stuff that I did like a year ago when I first started doing like actual cocktail videos versus doing like the easy comparison cocktail rating stuff that I was doing on TikTok. I noticing I was getting better at the skill set, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to pigeonhole. Like, I don't want to have a certain like cliche style, like you brought up, Leandro, about. I try different formats. One, to give variety to the audience in the first place, but also like for me, it's more fun to try and experiment with just trying a different approach. Right. Things that I talk through or don't. Things that are more instructional versus like, you know, done to music and just like nice
variety. I definitely see that variety. Whereas like for me personally, I went all in on the instruction. I was like, I'm going to answer every single minute question so that when people try to make a cocktail, because a lot of times I'll be like watching, I don't know, like food. I'll be watching something about food that I want to make, and I'm like, I want a tutorial and make it. And then they say, okay, put some yeast on the beans, right? And this is actually referencing an actual video from something that I made this week from TikTok, from Instagram. And I thought to myself, like, well, how much nutritional yeast? Like, it looks like she just took a big ass tablespoon and put it on there, but how much volume is this actually? Because nutritional yeast is really flavorful, and is it going to wreck the balance of flavor? And so I don't know if I get just super OCD into that. So when I do my content, I say every single like detail so that there's no question how to make this drink. I'm going to make sure that the glass isn't frosted so people know exactly what it looks like. Because I noticed that on certain like apps, I'll go to a bartending app and I'll see a cocktail and it will be like Ramos Gin Fizz and it's tinted blue. And I'm like, they're obviously using a gel on the light, or they're using like a filter. But like, why would you do that? Because then when people make it, they're going to be like, why isn't my cocktail blue? Right. So
and people take the visual things so literal too, like when they're not like educated on making cocktails, like there is the smaller questions and like thoughts that people have that they comment and they want to know about. And I think it's amazing that you do like such detailed work on educating and instruction, because I know half the people that like message me about like that level of detail, like I almost get overwhelmed, and I have recommended your page to other followers of mine. Like if you're geeky as fuck, go to Educated Firefly, literally in his name.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's a downfall to that as well, because I feel like your content's really cool. My content's kind of nerdy, but it's cool to see all those different formats. Like you're doing. And I have looked through your page even recently, and when we were prepping for this, like talking to you today, I was looking through your page a little bit, And I noticed, I was like, oh, sometimes he does this one camera thing where it's literally just pouring into a thing and shaking, and it's very much in real time. And then other times there's like 6 different angles that he probably had to make the cocktail 5 times to get all of these different angles, because, you got a time limit on cocktails. Like, I mean, when you're putting something in a tin, I think you could stop and start and stop and start. But once you get ice in there or something, like, you're going to have to shoot it a couple of times to get those different angles. And then you do the 3, I've seen you do the verticals, the 3 things of like getting limes, cutting them, and like, and like zesting or whatever. But I think it's smart because you can see how all of that content performs differently, and like how hooks into it,
Yeah. So I guess like circle back to the Nightcap like origin story. It really came from one, like realizing I was starting to build a skill set with what I was doing already and started getting more comfortable. So I'm like, okay, what's the next challenge? What's I can do that I think somebody would engage with? And Miguel actually started doing sort of like a Nightcap series. I'm like, okay, that's a really cool idea. But I'm like, I don't want to do it like him, because it was an extension of like what he already did, which I loved. It was just moodier. The cocktails were more like stirred, easy, boozy, just fun. And I was like, I'm wondering if I decide to take this more of like, it feels like a short film. And I love like art in general. Film is definitely something, now that I've been creating content, I've been paying more attention to, like, again, angles, lighting, dramatic use of like space, close-ups or far away, whatever, different perspectives to like just a more interesting draw to it.
Right.
But like, when you know all those elements, then how do you leverage them to create emotion? Which to me is, when you have a Nightcap, there's a certain amount of like a build to it, right? Where then it's like it's a cathartic sort of decompression moment for a lot of people. And it doesn't even you don't have to be a bartender to like feel what this is, because I had somebody reach out to me via DMs, and it's possibly one of like my favorite like DMs of all time, where he said him and his ex used to make each other nightcaps as a ritual. They would do it almost daily. They worked, their own jobs, but then like to come together late at night, they'd make each other a nightcap. And it was a really fun thing for them, like massive memories for both of them. But then they broke up. And it was like, I guess, semi-recent for him. But he was like, what I loved about your video is that it reminded me of all the great memories that I had having those nightcaps. And it's like, I wasn't expecting to hear a story like that. Personally going through like my own breakup very recently and sort of with that situation, but also hearing such a specific view of how they saw my content and feeling something inside that was positive, even though they were going through a very hard, like long-term breakup. And I'm like, thank you for sharing that. Like that makes this series to me even more worth it to continue, because who knows like what other thing that I decide to emulate in the video that'll resonate for someone that I didn't expect. And that's kind of like the beauty of approaching a piece of my content, doing a little bit more human and emotionally driven style, so that there's not just the education, there's not just the recipes. Again, it's about not just like a person, like the bartender person. It is trying to show that there's like a element to all of it. So,
well, man, it's really come that way, and I think that the fact that you got that DM and it resonated with someone, it really showcases that it's not always just about making a cocktail and it being good. I think that is a lot of what we do, obviously, but you're showcasing that it can really connect with someone, even if it is just a cocktail, but there's more that you do with it, with the emotional way that you take it, that I think really resonates with people. And I think along those lines, like maybe shifting a little bit, but like what's one thing that you didn't expect, either good or bad, about making content and becoming a creator? Because I think that those kinds of DMs, I know they've taken me aback when I've received something similar, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on like what's something that like you just didn't expect possibly, or like either good or bad, about like making content and becoming a creator.
I would say the biggest like unexpected good thing is the amount of messages that come through. And like, again, like I don't do hyper for educational type stuff. Like I'll do what I think is my favorite version of whatever cocktail. I'll make it fun, approachable, and consumable. I would like to say, but the amount of bartenders who message me and tell them like, thanks to you for like sparking my passion for the industry like over again. And it sometimes it's young bartenders. Other times it's like bartenders that are in their 40s and 50s, or people who bartend and just love what I bring to it, like who are like now miss bartending because of what I put. The messages that I get from people that are saying, I don't even drink, yet I love watching you do your thing. And so like for me, it's a little sometimes to look at my like DM requests. I try to do it like every other day or so to like filter through, answer questions, say thank you. But if I go for a week without checking, it's overwhelming as fuck. So that's a massively good thing. I would say the most unexpected bad thing in the beginning was like when a video would go and do really well, it starts getting pushed to an audience that doesn't usually view your content, and they can be fucking critical and like trolling. So they're gonna for something, they're gonna talk shit about whatever, and then now it's pivoted into my favorite part because I don't hold back now. Like before, I'd be like, no,
your responses are favorite.
Yeah.
I don't even acknowledge it. I don't even acknowledge it anymore. But now I want to. Now you play into it. Now I want to hear, because I've got brutal comments before. I mean, the people on the internet are like, people on the internet, dude, will say stuff to you that they would never say to anybody's face.
Facts. I'm like half the time I want to hunt down your mother and send this to her and see what she would say.
Yeah, see what
like,
she would
what
say.
are you doing?
You know, when you started that sentence, that's not where I thought you were going with it, but I'm glad that it ended in a wholesome way.
I didn't get to finish. I was
I
going
want to hunt down your mother, and then I want to tell her what you're doing on the internet.
Sure, that's hilarious.
Because people are brutal on the internet, and there have been times where I have wanted to get into it with people, but then I just realized that that's what they want you to do if you get into it. Like, and then you validated their existence. If you just ignore them, although you don't get the satisfaction of like hearing anything, it usually backfires, you know. But please tell me, that you own all of these rules.
I mean, I try my best. Something like if they've got a public profile, I'll find something to critique that is like probably a vulnerability of theirs to some degree. Or if it's their private account and there's like just a profile picture, I'll just make an offhand comment about something, because if they're judging me on how I look or criticize me for anything, I'm going to find a way to criticize them right back just to like give them their own medicine. But sometimes I do it like in a lighthearted way, because I want them to realize like I'm actually like working behind a bar and I talk shit for a living as well. Like that is a skill set that is built being behind a bar. And this girl commented recently that I look like Macaulay Culkin's left foot. And then I look at her profile.
Left foot? What does that even mean, though? That doesn't even mean anything.
I don't know.
How is that even insulting?
It was such an out-of-pocket comment where I go, okay, I look at her profile, and she legitimately looks like Sammy from the Jersey Shore, like not in her best grace. And I decided to say, well, that's funny coming from Sammy from the real world, or off the Jersey Shore, ordered off Wish. And then she ended up laughing with like 3 laughing emojis, and then followed me. So
there you go.
It's funny.
You turned her into a fan.
Oh, that's great.
With your cruelty.
It did. And it's funny because, like, you know, most big creators, they don't get lost in the comments like that. Very often, they just ignore the negative critiques, the bullshit that gets thrown around by trolls. And I guess to a degree, I respect that because they just don't have to waste any energy on it. But for some reason, I'll glaze over 1,000 positive comments, see that negative one, and you bet your ass I'm going to make time to say something.
I want to like pivot here real quick to your TikTok content, specifically this like I don't know if that chef, that first one to start reviewing people on TikTok. I'm pretty sure what's his handle? Chef Reactions, yeah. So and that guy is funny. He actually did something that I was never able to do, because one of the biggest sort of like, I don't know, like one of the biggest comments that people will say about me, a lot of the reason why I wanted to do this podcast with Louis too, and really try and get my personality out there, is because I can come across as a little arrogant in my content, right? Like I'm mansplaining shit to people, right? Which I take issue with, but why people think that, all right? Here's the thing about the Chef Reaction. So that guy has figured out a way to just be a complete dick, but like in such a likable way that you kind of love it, right? Even though he's like a complete dick to people. And maybe he's like rightfully so. But here's the thing about it. You figured out a way to do this kind of same-ish content, but be positive about every single person that you review. And what's crazy is that sometimes I'll look at certain creators, I'm not naming any names, but there are some certain creators that make cocktail content that have never been bartenders, and then they critique professional bartenders on what they're doing. And on the one hand, I think to myself, listen, I know a bunch of bartenders that became professional bartenders that were self-taught. So they literally, like one of my good friends taught himself all about classic cocktails, taught himself everything. This was at a time when YouTube didn't even have any cocktail stuff. There was one guy from Kentucky that was doing like these weird poetic videos about cocktails. And he was watching that guy and then like picking up like all of the cocktail books that were like, he was picking up like the Tony book and like the Joy of Mixology and some of like the first run of like real cocktail books to teach himself. So I you know, like if that route, like I got with anyone that's not a professional bartender or people who just make cocktail content for fun, but to critique professional, sometimes Japanese bartenders, which is like, why are you even going there? It's crazy to me. So I want to know, like, why, what's your first content, and then like what attracted you to that content, and how are you so positive? Those three questions, I know, in rapid succession. I hope you can remember them all. But how are you so positive on every single one?
I think I'll start with that one first. I'm generally just kind of a positive person, and the fact that no one else was critiquing cocktail creators, I knew that I didn't want to like ruffle feathers and maybe piss off people that I didn't want to piss off. You know what I mean? Like there's a certain degree that I respect about Chef. What I respect about Chef is that at least he's fair. Like he is truly reviewing like rage bait type fucking food content and just roasting them.
But he's critiquing stuff that's on there for clickbait. Like, but my whole thing about him, the one thing that I wanted to do though is I wanted to call him out and be like, have we ever seen Chef cook anything? Like, and I know that you know what I'm talking about because I've been around chefs a lot in my career. I know you know what you're talking about, but we've never seen you cook a damn thing. Well, we've seen your Nana do pancakes, but we have not seen you cook anything yet. And I kind of want to call him out and get him, see if I can get him to do a video on cooking, like where he cooks something.
So he's actually a buddy of mine, and we have a few like other like food creators that I'm in a group chat with him, and we've gotten close. We've gotten very close to getting him to do a food video, but he's just he like goes through the process of filming it like that. Like the man is 20 plus years in the business, has been to a degree like just over it for a long time, and he just got very, and he will say it to your face, he got very fucking lucky getting the amount of attention that he did. But there was something about, you know, because he does review like really well done food as well, and like he's just like drooling across the camera.
Yeah, like the chocolatiers and stuff. Yeah, like the dude that does like that dude that did the Willy Wonka thing, dude, where he's made everything. Yeah. Also, one guy did some Bombay Sapphire thing where he made an entire bar, every tool, all the shakers, everything out of chocolate. That's insane.
It was Amari Goshan or whatever his name was.
I think it's that guy.
He's actually down the street from me, his studio.
Oh, really? Yeah, that guy's
That guy was in Vegas.
That guy's incredible.
Insane.
He did a whole chocolate show on Netflix. I don't know if you guys ever watched it. I did because I thought it was insane.
I
did not
didn't
watch
know,
that.
but I'm not surprised. I mean, the stuff that he does is just crazy. Yeah.
So anyway, back to the TikTok review. I was just things back in those days, and I noticed it wasn't him that I saw that was doing the review content. It was actually some other kid who was like reviewing people doing iced coffees, and it was just gooberish, like sort of dude doing it, but he would review it like right at the end. So like you just wanted to know out of all the out-of-pocket things he was saying about the coffee making process, because some people would make iced coffee videos to have him review it, which I thought was hilarious. But the whole thing was that you were waiting for the rating at the end. So Gordon Ramsay ended up doing a few videos very similar as well. And like I saw variations of the ringing style duet videos. And I was like, you know what? I don't see anybody doing this for cocktails. Let me do 3 of them. And I searched viral cocktail videos, and I did 3 of them, and I just went to bed. I like didn't think about it because I tried posting things on TikTok and like didn't really have anything happen except for one other time with like talking about income, which is a whole other side story. But then I woke up and one of the videos I had done, which was like one of those Japanese bartenders doing a blue Ramos gin fizz, and it cracked 1 million views overnight. And I was like, what the fuck? So then back then, because I think TikTok's algorithm has very much been tainted by this like QVC version that we have now.
So annoying.
I knew that I couldn't let up. So I just kept doing reviews. And I could knock out like 3 to 10 reviews a day without blinking, because they were just as long as the video was.
You just do them in-app, right? You just do them on phone, in-app, so it's just like no editing, like just super easy stream of consciousness. That's like my absolute fucking nightmare, because I constantly put my foot in my mouth when I talk, so I need editing like so badly. Like it's my absolute nightmare to be like that's why I don't really do those videos. But I also don't get away with it because I look like the bad guy in Hard, and nobody wants to see that guy reviewing people. You know what I'm saying? Like. They want people.
No, I mean, I'll have to get it in character as the guy from Die Hard.
I could. If I did a good German accent, I could totally be Hans Gruber. But the problem is that I can't do accents either. So it would just be like a really. I mean, it might be good to just dress up like him and just do like a really bad German accent, like bad guy. You know. Yeah, I never thought I could really get away with it, but it was one of the things that I hooked into in your content first before you were really doing Instagram. That I fascinated by, absolutely fascinated by this content, because I was like, it's like review content, but he says nice to everybody. I was like, how is that even possible?
There were a few that I just didn't even provide positive feedback at all, and I was just like, nope, I hate that, I don't like this. This is gonna be a 4 out of 10 for me. And then people would just be pissed at me, and I'm like, is this the community that I want to have too? Like, do I want people to think like I'm not going to have something positive or like value? I decided to tone that's more positive. I take the mantra of like trying to provide value as much as possible, even if like I'm not going super deep with it. Have the balls to critique somebody. I'm like, I should at least be nice enough to give what I would do instead, you know? And then like offer based on my experience of making cocktails for a living for a decade plus, what I think this cocktail would taste in my mind and how I would rate it. You know, that's all that was.
Right. Although I gotta say, to your credit, you also don't just review complete trash. Like it seems like you review people who are actually doing something really cool, or people who are really trying hard to make a good cocktail. You know, and then maybe they don't know some things or something, but they're doing some stuff right. You're not like reviewing. Like I did a couple of review things on Instagram. If you look like in my Instagram, if you go scroll down, you'll see like. But I was doing like trash stuff. That time that lady took some, tequila and put it into a Mr. Coffee over the frickin' Starburst or whatever. And I was like, what is this? Not to mention the fact that like the Mr. Coffee's probably heating up the tequila enough to just basically burn the alcohol off anyway. So it's like you have like tequila water flavored, Jolly Ranchers or whatever she put in there, or Starburst or whatever, like this mini Starburst. And I was just like, review that stuff. And I was like, my heart's not in this. I can't do this.
I mean, I ended up having to review that too because I got tagged in that video like probably 100 times, and I was like, okay, I got bullied into it.
Yeah, because you're the guy. You're the one here, you know.
It's kind of along those lines of like reviewing other folks and you know, make cocktails. Like, what are your current views on like the state of alcohol, cocktail, social media? Right? I mean, all three of us are in the space. I'm sure we can have a pretty in-depth conversation about it. Leandro and I have talked about it a lot, actually, off camera. But like, kind of, what's your feelings on like how many people are in the space? Like, what's currently out there? Is there anyone that stands out to you? Because I mean, you're someone who stands out to, I think, both of us. But what's something that is like caught your eye that's really maybe undervalued? Someone who is like really standing out? Like, your general views on the current of like cocktail, alcohol, YouTube, social media.
So I mean, obviously, like the attempt to be an influencer, which I hate using that word by all means.
It's such a bad word. I think we should come up with a new word because influencer to me, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, Chris, but influencer to me indicates someone that like tries to get famous for nothing. And I don't think that anybody in this call, like anybody on this podcast, it does that, you know?
I agree. Go
ahead.
I would say like the desire to do that, especially in this particular niche, like is definitely growing. And there are some accounts that people are like trying to do video content all the time. They either tag me in videos, they comment and try and here and there. And I follow a few of like the smaller guys who have started and do it because they're passionate about it. And it's, to a degree, it's saturated, but it's also the audience will like what they like and engage with what they like. So it's a matter of like market forces at that point, like who's gonna get the highlight, who's not gonna get seen at all. So I feel very grateful for even having a platform, but I knew that I figured I had like something to say. So I just worked my ass off to put more consistency behind me, to get better, to always show improvement and like engage as much as I can with what people wanted to see and also what people hoped to see from me. And then I would say, as far as like accounts that really stand out, there's a girl named Sade.June, I think her account name is. She's a like young 20-something bartender out of LA who does a really cool approach. She's always doing like day in the life type stuff behind a bar, but she's from Gen Z. So her editing style is super tight, really fun, like throws in like little sound effects here and there. It shows a lot of her personality without her having to say anything. Because she's always like catching like weird faces on her, like when she's making drinks. Straining real quick, building cocktails all on the fly, prepping. So it's what I love about it is that it's giving the much younger audience to look to as someone who's a quote unquote expert. And she's very early in her career, but the potential for her to like continue leaning into the content side, but also developing her own career. And hopefully like sticking with it if it's something she really wants, and developing a really cool account that doesn't do just recipes. She's showing who she and like connecting with an audience as in a personal way, and not just because I want to know like what Christmas recipes she gives a fuck about. She doesn't do any of that, you know? So I appreciate her account for sure. And then, I mean, you guys are obviously like guys that I look to in terms of getting not necessarily like inspiration from, because you guys different approaches for me, but it's I admire what you guys have built and the conversations you're able to have, learn from you as well. Andrew, I think I too when I saw Ireland, like prior to me ever getting on the internet, and when I was trying to learn certain cocktails that I'd never heard of before, you always at least knew every backstory to every drink that you showed. And I thought that was super important.
Damn right.
Yeah, I mean, like, originally, that's what I did as a bartender. Like, I worked in an old historic bar, and people were like, I want to know the history of this place. And then they were like, they want to know the history of the cocktails. And so I made it my business to just learn all the histories behind all. And, you know, what I found also is, you know, I knew that I had a kind of a passion for history anyway. And just reading histories have been that way since I was a kid. But what I found was that, the history of drinking, right, and the history of cocktails is really kind of the history of the country and the history of the world. Like, you can trace every major event in history through drinking culture. And so when I found that out, it made it even more interesting for me. And I think that I have a good knack for, like, I talk a lot, but I think I have a good knack for talking, right? So I was really, like, my strength as a bartender was really my hospitality. Like, I am not the genius bartender. I'm no Kevin Coase. Like, I'm not going to be, like, doing modernist techniques, and, like, I'm not going to be, like, figuring out the stuff that they do at Noma, or anything like that, like, as far as drinks are concerned. But, like, my whole thing is all about, like, what I've always, like, trained bartenders under me, or, like, barbacks coming up into bartending, is that this whole job is 90% hospitality. It's 10% skill and talent, and, like, it's really a people job. And I think that's where I excel. I try to get that across in my videos, but it's funny because nowadays I feel like I'm doing so many of the same things. There's only so many cocktails until you start creating your own. But even the creations that you create are really just based off a few, like, if I have to see another video that's 2 ounces of spirit, half an ounce of liqueur, half an ounce of simple syrup, and an ounce or 3/4 of, like, lime or lemon, like, that's like every single original cocktail on YouTube right now, or on TikTok. So it's like there's only so much that you can do with it. So I've been looking at ways to, like, expand what I'm doing, because I don't know if there's going to be an end. I think you could do it indefinitely. I think there's enough cocktails that you could do it indefinitely. The question is how much is the audience going to tune in? How long are they going to tune in? Because I think that cocktails have different, like, it's more of a challenge than food does in that sense.
I agree.
I think you're doing a good job of that, though. I think that your approach is like right on money.
And then just to give Leandro his flowers as well, I told him this too when we first spoke, like, many months ago. I was like, man, like, before I ever even recorded a video, I was watching all of his stuff, trying to emulate him. So, like, my earliest approach, like, I never made Instagram or TikTok content. It was I only wanted to be on YouTube, and I just basically wanted to be this dude. And so I just, like, the beginning was me emulating. I was like, okay, I'm going to emulate him, but I'm going to try and do it my way. And it was just a poor man's imitation of Leandro at the beginning until I got some sort of a voice, I guess.
Oh, that's super flattering. And now I'm actually looking at your content and trying to emulate you guys so I can do this by myself, replace Marius, and make a better living. So
we've talked a lot about social media and that aspect of what you do. How do you view the intersection of, like, the online alcohol cocktail content world with the physical bar and alcohol world? Because I think that, at least from my perspective, I've seen it be separate and slowly start to integrate a little bit. Like, you don't really see, for example, some of these biggest bars that we all come to know, they are not really making content in the way that, like, we all are. Like, where do you kind of see the intersection of these two worlds? Like, is there a way where they can be more intersected? Do you think that maybe bars will take an approach similar to this in the future? Like, what do you think?
I think there's definitely there's always a need for marketing. So if they're smart, they will try and figure out a way to make content like this and tap into, like, the beauty and the chaos that is the algorithms on both of these apps. Because when it comes to, like, what our generation is using as a search tool, or I should say Gen Z, and specifically, they use their social media platforms as a search engine, like restaurants in New York City. Like, they'll search that so they can find creators that are talking about restaurants and recommending them or whatever.
Right.
Or if you're a restaurant and you happen to have content that falls within that guideline, you can be discovered. So I think it's smart for them to try and use that as much as they can as a marketing tool. It's beyond, like, word of mouth and, like, building a community locally with everyone that's around you, which I think should always be the focus for a bar anyway. You serve people that are above you in your high rise or down the street from you in, certain towns. It's the cocktail bar to drive to and park, but enjoy anyway. So, like, whatever that version is, you always got to connect with your immediate guests first. But when it comes to crossing that boundary, it's trying to, again, as we're trying to do, is find a way to communicate what's of value and what's interesting about you or your bar, where it's catching your attention and driving a want to come see you. And I think storytelling is a big piece of that, like hiring people to potentially make your content that are talented at videography, that can capture the space, the cocktails, the team, the menu. Those are all, I think, should be like critical steps for like the Instagram accounts that exist for bars. I think as an example, like that I found that was doing it really well when, photographs were kind of the king, was Death and Company. I think when they were growing and expanding into other cities and they were forming identities for each of those bars and they were hiring talented photographers to build that content out, I think they did a great job communicating the look and feel of what those bars were supposed to be. Do I think they're the best example of what that should be done as now? No. I think the best that I've seen that actually tapped into video creation actually hasn't even opened yet. And it's going to be by the girl Juliette Leroux and I forget his name, but the two schmucks that left Spain because their bar in Spain they had a falling out with, and they decided to go on tour with a bunch of different brands and start promoting an idea that they were going to find a new home. And now they're opening up a bar called Schmucks in New York. But what they do to help build awareness is they're building video content, and they're talking about the recipes that they did while they did pop-ups. They do advanced technique because she's actually she does most of the recipe videos, and she's actually a trained chef, and she approaches things in a very culinary way. She doesn't even really know classic cocktail foundations, yet she knows what balance is. And so she's using what her palate is telling her to make those decisions, and it comes across in her videos. Like, that's her process. And so what I appreciate about them is that while they don't actually have a bar yet, they're going to be one of the most in-demand places when they open, just because they've leveraged their ability to connect through social media really well.
Yeah, I want to add like a word of caution though for people who are brand reps. This is something that I go through with clients a lot, and I think it just needs to be said before we move on because I don't want to lose the thread of conversation here. I think that when brands start leveraging social media, they have to temper their expectations because a lot of things is they'll partner up with like an influencer, for lack of a better term, that has a major following, and then they think that those views and that following is going to convert to their brand immediately. And quite honestly, like, I think that we all know that authenticity is really what people want on the internet, and that what really resonates with them. And so that when brands start building this awareness, it has to come from an authentic place. You can't just like emulate popular videos that you've seen and then translate that. Like you said, what Death did is that they got talented people to then really project spaces we're authentically about. And I think that is where marketing, kind of has to go when it comes to social media marketing, because the thing is that people can kind of see through all of the kind of the gimmicky stuff. Like the audiences are incredibly intelligent. They know what they want. They know exactly what they don't want, even if they can't articulate it. And it just won't work for you if it's not done in an authentic way. And so it's really about building something new every time, which is not the easy fix that you want when you're spending however many thousands of dollars you're spending on a marketing campaign, but it's the only way to do it. You sort of have to find that identity, and then I don't know. I'm almost like talking to brand people that I imagine come across this video in some way, because I think you guys kind of already know that. But I just wanted to put that out there because it's very easy to just get see something that had a lot of views and then want to emulate that video. You see that a lot on Instagram and TikTok where people are like, oh, I'm just going to hop on this thing that I saw. And that's how things become trends, but they don't necessarily translate the same way that the original video did because it is just a copy of that.
I agree. And I think, brands show support in a myriad of ways, especially when it comes to us like creators who, put out content for a living, but also a massive part of their budget is to spend money on bars and supporting places that actually like house their spirits on menus and what. And I think after having conversation with brands quite often, what I would assume bars have a little bit more leverage with is that as long as they're staying authentic to what they do, the brand abides by it. And they're like, okay, how do we fit with that program? How do we get who your brand identity is? Right. And speaking from as a creator's perspective, and over the last year talking with brands, it's crazy to the amount of brands that like really try to dictate what you're going to say or what you're going to create. And I'm like, why the fuck are you reaching out to me and telling me you love what I do if you get to do something not remotely authentic to what I put out there?
100%.
So,
I think that there's a little bit too much overreach, and quite honestly, most branded content does not do well views-wise. It just does not do well. People know that it's branded, and they know, okay, this is a necessary evil. He's got to make a living, but I'm not gonna watch. I gotta say though that like the time that we sort of put our foot down recently, with just like getting what we wanted to get done in the video done. That video was like the most watched video the most watched reel that we've ever had of any video that we've ever posted about anything ever. So it's like, it's really about like, you need to make sure that, listen, like I understand that brands have there's a lot of like hoops that they gotta throw at you because there are legalities that they want to make sure that they're they want to make sure that that the proper disclosures are in every video. Sure. They want to make sure that their brand is being represented the way they want their brand to be represented, which is 100%. But then it's also about like, okay, so how can we then harness the voice of this creator that we like, and then bring that brand identity and that voice together to make some magic? You know what I mean? I think that's where like, and sometimes those lines get crossed when you're working with brands.
I 100% agree.
So like, what are some of your aspirations with your career from this point forward? Whether it's professionally, whether it's social media, whatever side you want to touch on, but like, what's something that you're like, you can't wait to do, or is like, as long as you're willing to share it, like what's something that you're like, I hope to one day do this?
I think I have a few different ones. Like, I think the idea of writing a cocktail book would be on that agenda. I don't know exactly like how I want to approach that yet, so I haven't even begun thinking about what that is. Thankfully, like I've taken a route with creativity lately where I just, if I think it's a really good idea, I'll write it down and I'll get to it when I get to it. But if like, I'm not going to force something out of me until I'm like, oh shit, this is exactly what I want. And I immediately like see a massive vision for it. And if I don't have the time to knock it out, then I will eventually get back to it. I'd love to, at some point, if this becomes successful enough social media wise, to like build out my own studio, do a full on professional bar, have it where it can be not only something I can enjoy without having to worry about work, but also just a massive professional, like at home or like separate space for creating content, but being able to do it with a very professional edge, something really dedicated, I would say. And then I do have the ambition one day to open up a bar. I do have like a pitch deck for that, and probably more than one, but I do have one written out that I would love to be like the first. I would love to have it be here in Vegas, because I think the community here is still is shy of having like really, really cool cocktail bars in town. And then honestly, when it comes to like what I'm putting out there in the world, I would say one of the biggest, loftiest dream that I have is to become like the Anthony Bourdain of bartenders, where I think that's the dream job for anybody, but the ability to like travel, talk to bartenders all around the world.
Hey, I was trying to do.
Listen, somebody deserves to do it. I don't care if it's me. I want to watch that content.
I already tried. We already made some travel content. It did not work. So, like, it didn't work for us. So, more power to you. If you do it, I will be your biggest supporter and also incredibly jealous. But I will be your biggest supporter for sure.
Well, if it kicks off and it works out well, I'll make sure you make it into the season somehow.
Just throw me some crumbs. That's all I'm asking for, man. Just a little feature in one of the episodes on the first season, please.
Just 5 seconds at a bar, you're just like ordering me a pint, and then that's it.
Right. Yeah. Whatever, man. I'll be that boy. I'll be the water boy. I don't care.
I would say that was like the most loftiest thing that I want, though, right there, for sure.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, I actually want someone. I want someone to be able to prove that there can be an Anthony Bourdain for cocktails, because I don't even know if that's possible for cocktails, but I would love it to be possible. Okay, now
Same.
I'm sorry, Lou. I don't interrupt you. I'm sorry, dude.
No, please. Are you kidding? The more the better, man. I'm having a good time. I'm just listening to you guys chat. I think this is great. I really worked hard on this question. All right. If you could make and have a drink with anyone in the world, alive or dead, who would it be, and what would you make?
Make a Negroni for Anthony Bourdain.
Well played, sir. Well played.
Yeah. No, but I'm being real though. Like, if there's someone who like I grew up watching Bourdain with my dad, and like we were always into like food shows and the travel aspect for sure. I grew up not being able to have a lot of traveling experiences, so like being able to like live through that man and then hear him poetically describe not just food, just the culture, the people, the climate of what was happening in that current state. You know, it's a very amazing snapshot of what life was like in those cities with those people with that food. And I think he will always remain like a massive source of inspiration. And my closest friends know that. So my cutting board here, actually, that my buddy made me, which is beautiful. He put like my branding on it, but also threw an Anthony Bourdain quote underneath it.
Awesome.
Oh,
I love that.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Amazing too. I love that cutting board.
Oh, it's fucking stunning.
Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful work. But the quote says, maybe that's enlightenment enough to know that there is no final resting place of the mind, no moment of smug clarity. Perhaps wisdom is realizing how small I am and unwise and how far I've yet to go.
I love it. That's a great quote too. Awesome.
Beautiful quote.
So wait, Louis, though, I kind of want to turn this question on you and just ask, like, who would your last, like, if like alive or dead cocktail be, and like, who would you want to hang out with?
Fuck. That is. You're gonna have to give me a second on that.
I will give you a
I'm
second,
gonna think about it.
I'm gonna take the second that you're gonna take and just say how fast Chris was with that answer, man. Like, most people hem and haw about that.
I know.
He was fast, quick on the draw there. With that answer. I think I know who mine would be too, but I want to hear yours first.
Oh God, man, I am drawing a huge blank. Well, all right. So I got an answer, and it actually wouldn't be that of a surprise. But I would have a cocktail. It wouldn't even be a cocktail because I don't think they would drink a cocktail. But I'd probably invent something with one of their favorite spirits. It's gonna get very niche. It's this dude who was he was the head manager of Manchester United for like 26 years.
Okay.
I'm obsessed with football to a degree that like I'm obsessed about a lot of things, but football is something that is like it was my obsession. So the name was Sir Alex Ferguson, and he's still alive. And he likes autobiography this man has ever written.
Wow.
I've watched every second of television that he's ever been a part of. I would probably make him, I know he drinks scotch, so I'd make him like a nice scotch cocktail. Probably make him like a nice penicillin. And just pick his brain about leadership and like leading a team. And just like, one of the things I struggled heavily as a restaurant owner and like a business owner is like, how do you get everyone pulling in the same direction? How do you get everyone rowing in the same direction? And so like leadership
is something that's so thought-provoking for me, and it's always been a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
And so I really gravitate towards wanting to listen to folks who are more leadership savvy, you know?
I feel like I want to do an entire podcast episode just interviewing you about your restaurant. I'm like so intrigued by what you have achieved.
You should.
At the age you've achieved it, it makes my life look really pathetic in comparison. And I'm like so intrigued by. I want to ask you so many questions about your restaurant, about the content you make. We will leave that for another time though. I will say, though, that I think that, and I don't want to poo-poo what you just said, but I do think that Sir Alex Ferguson is probably a Rob Roy kind of do it. You know? Like on the rocks, Scotch Manhattan guy. Maybe.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, guys. This has been incredibly fun. Chris, I want to thank you for joining us, man. This was amazing. I feel like I got to know you all. You know what's really funny about Chris, though, is that, like, we were in Ireland, never met this guy before. We were sitting in a random bar on the first night, and not only that, but it was like a random bar. Like, Marius and I had, like, a whole kerfuffle with the brand and the castle we were supposed to go to, and we wanted to go into Cork, so we booked a hotel in Cork, randomly picked the same hotel that the first event was, and Chris walked in, and it was literally like we'd known each other our whole fucking lives or something. There was like, without skipping a beat, I was like, I know who this guy is. We sat together and hung out, and then we had breakfasts many mornings of that trip together, and it was such a joy. And I felt like I got to know you then, but I feel like I got to know you a lot better today. So I just want to thank you for your time and also being just an amazing human being.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that more than you know.
I mean, honestly, like, just to echo your sentiments, like, I spent maybe, like, I think a day and a half with Chris back in New Orleans, and my flight got canceled for the third day that I was there. So I was like, I got no plans. So I basically just, like, hung out with Chris all day and just followed him around. And it was like, him and I just hit it off and chilled and hung out the whole day. And it felt pretty similar to that. And he's just a very genuine dude. And I appreciate your time, man. And thank you for being our first guest. Sorry if anything was a little not the greatest questions. I'm still getting used to this.
No, man. I had a great time, guys. You did. This is an amazing experience. Appreciate all the kind words.
I think you're being very kind. But I will also say this. Every single time I shoot anything, I feel like I need to put a button on it. So, like, I'm like, see you on another time or something on videos, because I feel like I have to put a button on it. So since you're our guest, Chris, I'm going to have you put a button on this episode if you can. Can you put like a saying, like, I don't know. I'm going to you to be creative about it, but how do we wrap and say goodbye to each other?
Fuck. The podcast is called Behind the Stick, right?
It is called Behind the Stick. Yes, it is.
Yeah?
Yes, sir. You are correct.
Perfect. My name is Chris Leavitt. I'm not just a bartender, and this was Behind the Stick with Louis and Leandro.
Let's go!
Let's go!
That was awesome.
Wah, 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 wah.